that more money should go back to taxpayers, less money should be going to government. Start cutting taxes. That's the way to do it. Stop exemptions and loopholes and all the other BS. Let's get to what actually works. Hello, welcome to this week's economy. I'm your host, Dr. Vance Ginn. Thank you for joining me again today. It's a pleasure to have you here. Be sure to go and check out my Substack newsletter at vanceginn.substack.com. Subscribe, maybe you can get a paid subscription and all that fun stuff. We've got a lot to talk about though, because I want to get right into it. All right, so today marks the conclusion of the 89th regular session of the Texas Legislature. And what a session it's been. I mean, it's been crazy. So much stuff's been going on. They waited so long to get any bills on the House floor to get the process started. They've been pushing a lot of populist sort of industrial policy sort of things and just blown out the budget. But they've also done some good things. I want to talk about that. But once renowned for its commitment to pro-freedom and pro-growth policies, Texas now grapples with decisions that challenge its conservative principles. This session has strayed from the fiscal conservatism Texans expect, including me, from expanding corporate handouts to unprecedented spending, even for film subsidies. It's ridiculous. The people of Texas deserve better. It's time to return to the pro-growth policies that have enabled the state to thrive and lead the nation. On the federal front, the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill in the House reveals a similar mix of commendable and concerning developments. How can we reconcile the benefits of tax cuts with drawbacks of increased government spending? Well, in this week's economy show and everything else, I'm going to dive into these significant legislative moves and assess their impact on the nation's economic health. Let's examine both the positive and negative aspects to gain a clear understanding of where things stand. Remember, you can watch the full episode on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and visit my website for more information. This is a reader-supported publication, so if you find this important, share it with your friends and families. Provide whatever you can. That'd be awesome. But otherwise, sit back, relax. Let's get right to it, okay? Number one, OBB pros and cons. In the news, the House passed the One Big Beautiful Bill, that's the OBBB, which now moves to the Senate for a vote. The legislation includes an extension of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, also known as the Trump tax cuts, and tax reductions on tips, overtime pay, and Social Security payments. It also introduces restrictions on Medicaid and SNAP, or the food stamp program, raises the state and local tax deduction, which is the SALT deduction, from $10,000 to $40,000, and allocates more funding for border security, rolls back several Biden-era clean energy initiatives like the Inflation Reduction Act, and raises the debt ceiling by $4 trillion. My take on this is that this is a step in the right direction. The OBB is a step forward in critical areas. Extending the expiring pro-growth tax provisions from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is a win for hardworking Americans. If this doesn't happen, they will all see increases in their marginal tax rates, which means they likely will see higher taxes. Plus, it'll roll back the standard deduction that was expanded, the marriage penalty that got rid of, and a whole bunch of other things that are in there. I think those are really important to extend and hopefully make permanent. It's also good to see a rollback of costly and ineffective clean energy subsidies and some reforms to government programs like Medicaid and SNAP. But there's room for improvement. Despite these positives, the bill still spends too much and misses opportunities for deeper reforms. It includes too many targeted tax carve-outs, classic examples of government picking winners and losers. This includes carve-outs for taxes on tips, which just means we're going to disincentivize people getting paid W-2 wages and having more tips. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it does mean that you're carving out a portion of this, and it will create unintended consequences. The same thing goes with overtime pay. Same thing goes with Social Security income. I mean, these are all things that are going to have a big influence on the budget and the economy, and I'm not sure that it's going to be pro-growth, so we'll see. Broad-based tax relief would be far more effective in fostering long-term economic growth for families, workers, and businesses. Moreover, the bill fails to deliver substantive reform to Medicaid, contributing to unsustainable government spending. So what is the path to prosperity? Well, if we want Americans to truly prosper, like I do, and I'm sure you do too, we must pursue faster economic growth and tighter fiscal discipline. Runaway government spending is helping fuel the Fed's inflation creation. Instead of raising the debt ceiling again by $4 trillion, Washington should focus on cutting spending, reforming quote-unquote entitlements, and providing broad pro-growth tax cuts to promote growth. Some of the recent research that I've done on this and been looking at is that if you just limited government spending to 1% per year instead of the 4, 5, 6% that they're growing by, then we could actually see a reduction in the debt over a decade by about $3.5 trillion, right? That's if you had growth that was just 1 percentage point faster than what we thought it was going to be. If you limited government spending to just 1%, that would actually provide $4.7 trillion in less debt over the next decade. So you add those two together, and we're talking about $8.2 trillion less by just having 1 percentage point more in economic growth, so from 2% to 3%, and having 1% growth in in spending. And we could balance the budget in 5 or 6 years. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. That's really what's on the table, and I hope with some key reforms can be made there. Number 2, the good, bad, and ugly of the Texas session. In the news, with the Texas Legislature adjourning sine die today, it's time to reflect on what lawmakers accomplish and what they failed to deliver. From modest wins to major disappointments, how did Texas measure up this session? Well, my take is that first on the good, Texas finally made a long overdue move toward education freedom. Lawmakers approved the state's first school choice program, Education Savings Accounts, or ESAs. But while this is a historic step in the right direction, Texans were promised universal school choice, whereby every student who wants one can receive it. Instead, they got an ESA pilot program, essentially, serving less than 1.5% of Texas school children, which there are 6.3 million school-age children in Texas. So they put a lot of money towards it, $1 billion, the largest ever. There's going to be the most number of kids on it, 100,000. But we're only talking about 1.5% of Texas school children are going to be on it. And if it's closer to what Louisiana just saw in their first year as people were fleeing public schools to find other options, it could be closer to 3%. If it's 3%, what does that mean? 3% that are applying. That means it'll be 200,000 students instead of the 100,000 students. And that means 100,000 students would not have the opportunity to go to the school that meets their needs and their desires for the best fit their families, values, and everything else. So this is a huge mistake. Overall, I'm glad that they passed something to get things started, and I'm hopeful from what I'm hearing from some folks is this is just the beginning. There's going to be more to be done later, but I'm also concerned that this will come back to bite the Republicans in charge of the House and in charge of the Senate because they weren't able to get this done like they should have with full universal school choice that could have saved $20 billion a year that I've been talking about for a long time. Now, the other thing is that they also got a political concession in return for this, basically a bribe for $8.5 billion increase in funding to government-run schools. So while there's some good there, I actually think there's a lot of bad that's involved with that as well. Now, what is the bad? Well, the legislature doubled down on corporate welfare for Hollywood stars of $300 million every biennium and contractors through taxpayer money in the general fund and constitutional funds. Lawmakers failed to deliver meaningful reforms to Medicaid as enrollment continues to surge past 4 million people. Lawmakers were unable to provide substantial property tax relief, only about $6.5 billion of property tax relief, and $3 billion of that was from old stuff that they had passed years ago they just got a fund. So there really wasn't much done in the way of using surplus money. Only a quarter of the $24 billion in surplus was used for this. Now, they also passed several misguided regulations, such as the age verification mandate in Senate Bill 2420 for app usage by minors, to make so to all of us now have to use and verify our identity in some capacity. When we get on the App Store for Apple or the Google Store or whatever it is, whichever one you're using, you're going to have to put your information in there. And now we've got private entities having our information. I don't even want the government to have that information, much less these private companies. So I think it's a bad deal. There's probably going to be freedom of speech sort of lawsuits that are going to come about this because I think it definitely goes against that. But we'll see. I think it's going to be held up in court for a while. They also put a ban on hemp and THC, right? I mean, if you look at the research and the evidence out there, alcohol is much more destructive for people on a number of ways than THC, marijuana, pot, whatever you want to call it. Yet they want to ban it. there are some loopholes apparently where you could still sell a small amount of edibles and things like that had a small amount of THC in them across Texas. And so they're trying to get rid of that. But this is the opposite direction of where we should be going for liberty and everything else. Whether somebody is less productive whenever they're high, it should be up to them. If they're not productive, then they'll lose their job. They'll get lower pay. They'll get fired, all those sort of things. And that allows for the market to work, to allow for personal responsibility. Instead, what we're doing is increasing dependency on government to telling us what to do and what not to do. And that's not the direction we should be going. Sure, call me a libertarian, call me classical liberal. Yes, I am those things, but I'm also one who believes strongly in families and parenting and people. I trust people, not people in government, because they have too many other interest groups and things in mind. What I trust are people out in the private sector. So I don't want people to go around and just smoking pot all the time and doing things and being less productive if that is what happens to them. But I also don't want people drinking alcohol all day and getting drunk and having accidents and all these other things and causing a lot more problems for their body and everything else. So why wouldn't we be banning alcohol? I don't want to ban alcohol. I don't want to ban THC either, though. I think this is a bad situation where the Republicans are getting more and more along the lines of hard on crime or tough on crime compared to the right on crime or smart on crime ideas that have really dominated over the last couple of decades. And so this is another direction that they're just heading the wrong direction. And it's a concerning drift toward government overreach overall. Now, what's the ugly then? We had a lot of bad there. In the most egregious move, Texas passed the largest budget in its history, $336 billion over 2 years. This should raise red flags for a state that claims to champion fiscal conservatism. Had lawmakers held spending growth to the rate of population growth plus inflation, a sustainable budget over the past decade, Texans would have saved $51 billion in excessive government growth and the taxes that funded. This missed opportunity is especially frustrating given the advantages Texas had this session: a booming economy, a record $24 billion budget surplus, or one of the records, and a $28 billion stash in the rainy day fund. The more money should go back to taxpayers, less money should be going to government. Start cutting taxes. That's the way to do it. Stop exemptions and loopholes and all the other BS. Let's get to what actually works. All right, let's go to the next one. Number 3, market health update. In the news, Moody's recent downgrade of the U.S. credit rating sent ripple effects through financial markets. Bond prices have fallen, driven the yield on 30-year Treasury bonds above 5%, an 18-month high. So you're ready for mortgage rates to skyrocket too, right? Stocks are slipping and the dollar has declined by roughly 0.8%, at least at the time of this writing. Analysts caution that rising yields could curb investor optimism following the recent pause in tariff escalations. So my take on this is overspending is the root cause. Moody's downgrade reflects what many of us have been warning about for years. Washington's addiction to overspending is finally catching up with us. The downgrade was driven by concerns over ballooning federal debt, and rightfully so. Across all levels of government, spending continues to grow far faster than the ability of American families to pay for it. The result, higher taxes, more debt, and persistent inflation that eat away at our paychecks and erode opportunity. The clock is ticking. The fiscal recklessness cannot go on forever. At some point, and it looks to be very soon, global investors and foreign governments may decide U.S. debt is too risky. If demand for government bonds weakens significantly, we would face a full-blown debt crisis with consequences that ripple far beyond Wall Street. The way out is clear. There's only one sustainable path forward: stronger economic growth and fiscal discipline. Lawmakers must implement real budget constraints, starting with cutting spending now and capping changes later with a cap on annual spending growth tied to population growth plus inflation, a sustainable budget. This keeps the government from outpacing the ability of the average taxpayer to fund it. When the government grows faster than the government, when the economy grows faster than the government, prosperity follows. But the American dream becomes harder to reach if we keep piling on debt and spending unchecked. I think this is something we've really got to be looking at, because with the tariffs and all the other uncertainty going on right now, we're really seeing a lot of strife and grief that's happening for many Americans across the country. And it's unfortunate. I'm hopeful that this could be overturned soon. With all these pauses and everything else going on, we really need to have more certainty out there. And speaking of certainty, number 4, where Trump's trade war stands. In the news, just weeks after signaling a pause in tariff escalation, President Trump is again ramping up trade threats, this time proposing a tariff of 50% on goods from the European Union and a 25% tariff on foreign-made iPhones. Some businesses are exploring legally questionable ways to sidestep these costs. So my take is Who really pays the price? Well, any hope for relief from tariffs' economic damage has been short-lived. These renewed threats can highlight a recurring failure to recognize who truly bears the cost of tariffs, which is hardworking Americans. From families facing higher prices at the store to businesses squeezed by rising input costs and passing that on through lower pay, fewer jobs, and lower returns on stocks, tariffs hit the people they claim to protect. Tariffs are not tax cuts, right? Tariffs are taxes on American consumers and businesses, plain and simple. Labeling them a quote-unquote necessary defense doesn't change their effects. Higher prices, supply chain disruptions, distorted markets, and less economic freedom. While some businesses benefit from politically granted exemptions, which is ridiculous, others scramble for workarounds. Hardly a level playing field. So what does real defense look like then? If we want to truly defend American workers and strengthen our economy, the path is clear. Low taxes, limited regulation, and free trade, and less government spending. Protectionist policies like tariffs only shrink opportunities, hurt competitiveness, and chip away at prosperity. We must advance policy that empowers people to prosper instead of raising taxes on them. This is the largest tax increase since George W. Bush did early on in the 90s. So this is terrible. This is not something that Trump should be doing. Okay. Number 5, housing keeps taking hits. In the news, spring typically marks the peak of real estate selling season. But this year, first-time home buyers are shifting their focus to smaller homes in response to high prices, elevated mortgage rates, and limited inventory. Builders are also turning to smaller builds to contain rising costs. My take, increased supply, reduced costs. High interest rates, labor shortages, and skyrocketing material costs make homeownership increasingly out of reach for working families. But the answer isn't more government intervention. It's a return to pro-growth policies that allow builders to build. That means lowering taxes, streamlining permitting, reforming zoning laws, and ensuring access to a skilled workforce. What can be done? To make housing more affordable and expand access to homeownership, policymakers must remove government-imposed barriers and empower the private sector. Whether at the federal level, through the Trump administration and Congress, or at the state level, or at the local level, leadership must focus on restoring affordability and opportunity in the housing market. So what are major areas of reform? The path forward starts with reducing government spending, eliminating tariffs, rolling back burdensome regulations, reforming zoning and permitting, cutting taxes, and supporting infrastructure and labor necessary to fuel the construction industry. By tackling these issues head on, we can start making the American dream of home ownership more attainable for hardworking Americans. Check out my recent episode on housing costs and explore my pro-growth policy guide tailored to the construction industry that's going to be in the show notes page. So, thank you for joining me in this episode of This Week's Economy. For more insights, visit vanceginn.com and get even greater value with a paid subscription or a complimentary subscription to my Substack newsletter at vanceginn.substack.com. So until next time, God bless you and let people prosper.